Record. Okay, so again, we record for not only public recording purposes, but then because I can upload them to the Ward 12 Open Documents folder, which I'm working to sort of integrate, get the link out there so you can always access um, what I'm doing and sort of data and statistics and all that stuff. Current legislation, co-sponsored legislation, abandoned legislation, so on and so forth. Um, but it's also helpful for neighbors that can't attend these meetings because then they can watch on their own time. So first and foremost, welcome to the town hall. Here's our brief little, very quick snapshot agenda. I am going to start with the Hampton Kings Highway traffic studies because those have been ongoing for several months now. In the terms of the Hampton Kings Highway traffic study, it's been years that's been ongoing. So we are 12, 13, and 14 did a joint Kings Highway traffic study a few years ago, and we got the results during the middle of the pandemic, also during the middle of an interim seat. So for 12, so they sort of put it off. It was also a very expensive traffic study result. So the recommendations, you know, you can sort of a la carte the bits and pieces of what you want to do. The bare minimum being, you know, updating the sidewalks to be ADA compliant, which will be $246,000 across all 3 wards. The repaving, because as we all know, Kings Highway is absolutely due for repaving, which is about a decennial project. So once every 10 years, they try to redo the very major arterial roadways, and you know, lane reduction, so on and so forth. So that's sort of the basic package, which we do want to move forward with. We're hoping to get the entire project, which is just under $2 million. It's $1.85 million altogether. Fully funded by the relief funds that are coming in, also known as the Biden bucks. That $2 million project does not cover where the firehouse is, that super awkward intersection by Nottingham and Kings Highway. That in and of itself would be a $2 million project, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. So we're kind of letting that very necessary update lay for the moment, solely because we do not have the funding. Hampton, we are moving forward, and work will be moving forward on that this month, within the next 30 to 40 days. That is a major update as well. Again, about once every 10 years, they like for all of the major arterial roadways to be fully repaved. We are doing a road diet, as it's called, so a lane reduction. And the lane reduction is for several reasons. In all of these, allow me to note, all of these are outlined in the respective Hampton and Kings Highway traffic study findings. So I have the actual books for the Kings Highway traffic study, but there's also an online PDF. There's the brief sort of slideshow version that they presented to the public. And then there's also the very in-depth one that's, I mean, 60 or so pages long. So I can make both of those available to anyone. If you want, just shoot me an email, which I will drop in the chat. I will probably drop my email a few times in the chat because that is the best way to reach me, unless it's an emergency, in which case cell is the best way to reach me. There's my email and my cell. If it is ever a medical emergency, a emergency relating to crime or anything of the sort that would involve the police, call 911. That in terms of 911, it's responsiveness, that's a conversation for another day. So we are moving forward with Hampton. We are doing the lane reduction, Tom Oldenburg and myself. He's picking up quite a bit of the funding. More of it falls in Ward 16 than it does 12, but he's definitely burning through his ward capital so that we can get the very necessary infrastructure updates that you want to do. They're the most expensive pieces to do. Part of this is he and I, Tom Oldenburg and myself, are both incredibly keen to address Jameson and Hampton, which statistically is more deadly than the accidents on Kings Highway. So, I mean, we've had to medevac a civilian out of that intersection from a major crash incident several years ago. the amount of accidents that occur there, both vehicular and also pedestrian, as pedestrians try to cross Hampton to get to or from Wilmore Park. Something has to be done about Jameson and Hampton. So we're looking at immediate interim traffic calming measures, sort of the stopgap measures that we have available to us as alders and as civil engineers on the street side, and long-term infrastructure fixes, such as putting in a crosswalk, or perhaps even a stoplight. The stoplights are expensive because they're $250,000 minimum, and our annual ward capital is 287. So jumping down, we're going to skip medical marijuana because I think that's going to be the biggest chunk of tonight's meeting. So I want to go ahead and go directly to Wilmore. We are working with Donna Behringer, State Rep for the 82nd, the Missouri Department of Conservation, the Parks Commissioner, Kim Hagley, the Missouri Botanical Gardens, and a few other organizations to address Wilmore Park's flooding issues. It is, as we believe, an infrastructure issue that's compounded by the sort of floodplain that naturally occurs whenever you have hills and valleys. Wilmore Park is absolutely beautiful, but it's Wilmore Park, not Wilmore Pond. So we're working to address that. But I do have some good news, if you will. The catfish deaths have been very, very high this summer. Just this past week, there were 10 dead catfish in the North Pond by the playground. And then when Donna Behringer and I did a walkthrough 2 weeks ago, there were about 12 or so dead catfish in the South Pond as well. What's notable is that carrion eaters, which there are carrion eaters to be found in the South in St. Louis, weren't eating them. They were just allowing them to sort of sit there and congregate. And our immediate worry was that the ponds were polluted, or they were under oxygenated, or perhaps they were over chlorinated. You'll notice that there's always water spouts, almost like a water cannon that runs constantly during the summer. And that's for chlorination purposes, to keep down algae blooms. So in the winter, they don't run them because the algae blooms don't have the opportunity to grow, because it's a seasonal issue. So, I mean, we were really quite nervous that there was a much more concerning and major issue. And it turns out that upon communication with the Missouri Department of Conservation, MDC, it turns out that they had a diseased hatchery stock, and that ultimately it's just bad fish. So good news in the sense that it's not major pollution in Wilmore Park. Bad news in that it does mean the fish are going to continue to die, especially as the weather heats up. So I'm working with the Parks Commissioner and also MDC to address the sort of how can we sort of stem it as we go into the very hot months of the summer. Always crossing our fingers for a mild St. Louis summer. The Ameren properties at Macklin and Loughborough. So we are having a forum, which is slated for June 28th at 6 p.m. Well, here I am at Gateway Science Academy South. So at Gravois and Loughborough. That's another reason why these town halls are excellent, because for me, I just know in my head that it's Gateway Science Academy South at Gravois and Loughborough, but I should probably tell that to the public too. So the Ameren properties also stretch back several years, back to Larry's last re-election, I believe. And what ultimately happened was those three properties are in a historic preservation district, which means there's an entire process. And I'm sure Liz, if she's still in the video, can talk to it, or at least is well familiar. But the historic preservation, the cultural division, dictates how buildings and specifically residencies look in protected neighborhoods. Princeton Heights is somewhat fragmented, where it can almost be block by block difference. So the block of Finkman that I'm on is not a historic preservation district. However, you just go a block or two over and now you're within one. So it can absolutely be confusing. And ultimately that's the snag that was hit there. They originally purchased the three properties so that they could tear them down to put in a substation there. The substation we currently have on Mackland is over 50 years old. It is not failing, but It's outdated. It We're getting to the point where it's a bit of a Theseus' ship, in that they're having to replace more than than not, and sort of patch and band-aid it. And newer technology is not only more efficient, more compact, but it's also quieter. So as neighbors along Schulmeyer, Mackland, and even Loughborough will tell you, there's a sort of hum that comes with the substation. And technology has advanced to such a degree in the past 50 years, the past half century, that the hum is no longer such a major issue. So they went back, Ameren went back to, both literally and figuratively, to the drawing board. And this forum, for June 28th, it is no longer slated. I did confirm it uh, with Gateway Science Academy. Um, will be their opportunity to not only engage the public and get public opinion, which is what I'm keen on, but also to show myself, the Princeton Heights Neighborhood Association, and the neighbors of Princeton Heights and City in Ward 12, their current proposed plan, of which I only have sort of a rough idea of what they'd like to do. So anyone living along Loughborough from Gravois to January, Schulmeyer from Loughborough to Mackland, and the immediate vicinity along Mackland will be receiving official letters inviting them to the forum. It is a limited capacity due to the pandemic and also due to the space. And I do not believe it is ADA compliant or accessible. So we are working arduously, both with the Boulevard Heights, the Princeton Heights Neighborhood Associations, and myself, to locate a consistent venue that is ADA compliant and also allow us to use the space for free or next to free, as we're not getting the budget as aldermen for forums. Um, so if anyone has any recommendations on that front, I've got both neighborhood associations looking, and we hope to have something soon. But for the sake of this forum, we will be hybrid. It'll be both virtual and in person, with the in person being given priority to neighbors who live in the immediate vicinity. And as always, as absolutely always, anyone in Ward 12 and even outside of Ward 12 is welcome to send me a letter, call, send me an email. Those two would be preferred, but you could send me a text, or we could have a phone conversation to express their opinion or their thoughts on these developments or these projects or so on and so forth, as it helps inform me of what the individuals I represent want. So it's very, very important. Moving on, I'm going to skip the St. Louis Public Radio News project right quick. This week we did do the Ward 12 capital budget allocations, and all the wards, but we were in a very, very, very good spot financially, all things considered. So all of our budget lines, so all of the budget lines that I have control over added together equaled about $1.28 million. Now that doesn't mean by any means that I have $1.28 million to play around with and do with as I please, nor is that my approach to my 2 years in office. For example, $547,000 of that is dedicated solely to Wilmore Park, as Wilmore Park has a dedicated budget all for itself because it's a city park, it's a regional. Did we have a comment there, or? Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ken. I did have a comment. Also, I misspelled Loughborough in the day's bill. Kings Highway. Thank you for pointing that out. So, you know, $547,000 of that budget is automatically allocated to Wilmore Park. We did get our full $287,000 this year from the earnings tax. So thank you for everyone who voted for Prop E, earnings tax. That was vitally important to sustaining our city budget, specifically our ward capital budget. If you have put in for a sidewalk in Ward 12 through the 50/50 program, you're welcome in advance. I put $190,000 towards that, which fully funds the city's portion of that. So hopefully everyone that's put in for a 50/50 sidewalk replacement or update or so on and so forth will be getting them in order of oldest to newest request. And that's the largest chunk. So cement is incredibly expensive. It is, I think, currently about $10 per square foot. Um, and consider, an entire section of sidewalk absolutely adds up. So uh, 20,000 to refuse to bring them to the 50,000 that they prefer to have in their budget line at all times for each ward. 10,000 for forestry so that they can maintain 100 trees availability. A sapling is $200 per sapling. They are working with residents to allow the residents to select which sapling they have installed in the tree lawn or the easement that's on the other side of the sidewalk. We have relatively short easements. Some wards have like 8-foot easements, and I don't know how they get away with it, but we have relatively short. So generally, forestry, specifically Alan Jankowski, the forestry commissioner, is very happy whenever citizens reach out and say, hey, I'd like to have a tree installed and I would like a black locust, or I would like a red maple, or so on and so forth. There's an entire web page dedicated on the website to trees that are available to be planted. And that comes from that budget. So we always try to maintain, or forestry always tries to maintain, enough budget to supply 100 trees per year in Ward 12 specifically. Now, in the first quarter of the year alone, we installed more trees in Ward 12 than some wards have put in the past 5 years. So it speaks to the beauty and verdant nature of our ward, and it's a constant ongoing process. Tree trimmings have sort of stalled for the time being, as forestry also maintains city-owned properties when it comes to mowing. So they are arduously working to keep everything mowed and keep everything trimmed. There is a staffing crisis at City Hall. So if anyone knows of anyone, or if anyone knows of anyone who happens to know of anyone that needs a job that pays at base minimum $15 an hour with very good benefits, if I can say. I was very pleased and surprised with the health benefits that are provided to city employees. Please let me know. You can reach out to me. You could reach out to the mayor's office. You could reach out to the personnel division. You could probably just walk into City Hall and say, I want a job, and receive it. I mean, we've got 2 guys for the entire city filling potholes. We have 6 in forestry that are maintaining all the city-owned properties and mowing. And I believe it's the tree trimming crew as well, though I would trust but verify on that. So all in all, with all said and done, with all the allocations made, all of the budget requests fulfilled in full, with the exclusion of streets, because we operate from the contingency fund. So any funds residual left over that haven't been allocated to budgets goes into a contingency fund. And all that means is that if I need to allocate $10,000 more to forestry to provide funds for 50 more trees, then it goes to the estimate and apportionment board for approval. And I believe they just approve them on bank. They don't really necessarily go into it. It just slows the process down. So all said and done, Ward 12 currently stands at all budget requests with the exception of streets, whom I did bump up to 60,000 from 48. We have about $506,000 left in my contingency fund, in our contingency fund. So say there's a crisis and we need to emergency repay the 3. Well, I can dip into that 506,000. I specifically wanted to keep at least $500,000 in the contingency fund, just because my predecessor, or rather my successor, will be in a good spot once they assume office. It leaves us some wiggle room while also meeting the full budget requests of every other department. So again, let me take a brief moment to check the chats. Okay, yes, and Liz is absolutely correct. All building materials are incredibly expensive at the moment, and you're welcome for the sidewalks. For me, as well as Ann Schweitzer 13 and Carol Howard of 14, in regards to the Kings Highway sidewalk renovations and updating, it's a question of accessibility. because while we were sitting having that meeting discussing what we were going to fund and what we weren't going to fund and sort of making that call, I saw my neighbor across the street, the ever lovely Miss Mary, whom I will also call Granny Finkman at times, which makes her chuckle. I saw her going for her daily walk, and she utilizes a walker, and watched as she had to navigate stepping down from a standard 6-inch curb. ADA compliant and accessible sidewalks are not something that we can compromise on. And yes, they are incredibly expensive. For one ADA compliant sidewalk, it's $5,000 flat. But I don't think that's an area that we can compromise on. Accessibility is never an area that we can compromise on. So, thank you for recognizing that it's both expensive, but also. Oh, do we have a question from the participants or? Okay. And if there ever is a question, feel free to unmute yourselves because I'm also, my Zoom is minimized, so I have to periodically pull it back up to see the comments, but I'm also working off of the agenda here that's being screen shared. So you can always unmute yourselves and be like, Bill, I want to say something, and I'll say, okay. Graduation letters. If you know of a graduate or anything of the sort, so be it a high school graduate, be it a someone going into a PhD program, I had that request, or if it's a middle schooler or a preschooler or anyone, and you think that they would like to have a graduation letter from myself, from City Hall on my official letterhead, I am happy to do that. I'm trying to keep an eye on that say a graduate lives here, and I make a little mental note or a quick little phone note, and just send a generic. Send a generic thank you. And I do have a form for it. Let me show you my super secret email there. The 412 public documents folder that I made. I'm trying to figure out how to integrate so that you all have access to budget reports and so on and so forth. But that is not. Here we go. So I've made a Google form. This is my sort of launch of it, I suppose. So if you know of any graduates who would like a letter, just fill out this quick little form. What it does is it generates a Google spreadsheet for me, and I can just go in, and it also notifies me when someone submits. So when you hit submit, I immediately get an email, and I can go type up the letter. It can be super generic. I just need the name of the graduate, the address where to send the letter. Then if you want to provide the grade level that they're graduating from, or some additional information like I have 2 houses down, a woman is going into a PhD program at SLU for biomedicine. I mean, that's incredible. And we need citizens that are going into biomedicine, and we need more women in medicine. We need more women in office. You know, someone who's interested in running for office, and then submit that to me. Because I am soliciting both addresses and names of potentially minors, all entries will be not only confidential, but will be deleted after July 2021. So that is for observation of COPPA, which is the Child Online Privacy and Protection Act. And to me, it's just good common sense. And, you know, it's not legislative business or anything of that sort. It's just a friendly little, hey, 2020 was an incredibly difficult year, but you persevered and you did it. Graduated. So I'll be putting those on my Facebook page, and I'll also be dropping them in the Facebook groups. So Progressive Princeton Heights, Progressive Neighbors of Princeton Heights, the Princeton Heights Neighborhood Association, and so on and so forth. Let's go ahead and go back up to the St. Louis Public Radio News Project. St. Louis Public Radio News, specifically Corinne Ruff, is doing a news project on covenant deeds here in St. Louis, and specifically South City. And it's covenant deeds aren't unusual to come across. There's quite a few in Ward 8, for example, so around Tower Grove Park, that will have a covenant that says from, I mean, you know, half a century ago, if not a century ago, that say, you know, this home can never be used for a business, or this plot of land can never be used for a business. So covenants aren't necessarily unheard of by any means, but St. Louis, specifically South City, St. Louis, very specifically Princeton Heights in St. Louis, once upon a time had racially restrictive covenants, and that is what the project is centered on. St. Louis Public Radio is essentially asking that people look into their deed records, recognizing fully that probably none of us who are still alive today uh, could have had anything to do with these racially restrictive covenants. But to just sort of illustrate sort of where St. Louis was and where we are now, and how these covenants have shaped our city, and so on and so forth. And it's part of a sort of group of research projects that St. Louis Public Radio News has been doing and is continuing to do, along in tandem with other entities, various universities, and so on and so forth. So if anyone needs help navigating that, or would like to participate, or would just like more information about their deed irrelevant to this project, you can also reach out to me. You can reach out to Corinne Ruff if you're interested in assisting with the project. I'll be dropping those links in the neighborhood groups as well, and it is currently up on my Facebook page also.
Oh, okay, if I can jump in really quick.
Oh, please do. Who is that?
Yeah. Okay. This is Liz.
Perfect.
And I'm a realtor, and actually, with the restrictive covenants, it's something that I'm going to ask you for some more info so I can pass it on to St. Louis realtors, because we're trying to work with HOAs on the restrictive covenant language that might still exist, on helping them remove it, because a lot of HOAs have that language. It's illegal, it's unenforceable, but to help folks remove it and not have it cost the HOA a bunch of money, so that we can update all of that stuff and have it correctly recorded. So kind of a little bit in that same vein. So I'm sure that'd be a great project to hear more about, but also see if there's any resources the realtors can provide, because they are trying to help people make things updated, so that somebody, if they're purchasing a property, doesn't come across language that's inappropriate in today's world.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, and I'll get you in contact with Corinne Ruff if you want, Ms. Smith. I'd be happy to make that sort of intro. But again, both St. Louis Public Radio News, and myself want to reinforce that this isn't anything that any of us could have controlled or contributed to, right? So the project is not geared, as I understand it, it is absolutely not meant to make anyone feel bad or anything of the sort. It's really just to show St. Louis's history, and to also bring to the public attention these covenants, which many people aren't aware of. So thank you for your input on that. And I would be to loop the St. Louis Realtors Association into that, into this sort of tangential project. So all that said, it is time to come to the big ticket item of the night, the Medical Marijuana Dispensary permit application, which has been submitted for the old Steak and Shake at Gravois and Hampton. I got that one right. So Gravois and Hampton.
No.
I know that at Eichelberger in Hampton, there's the old P&G paint store that's empty. And I do know that a medical marijuana dispensary applied for that location. However, it was declined on the grounds that it was much too close to Bishop DeBerg. I do not know if this is the same company or if this is the group. And quite frankly, I don't have much information about the application or anything else in regards to it. The way that we're notified in City Hall at the Board of Aldermen specifically is that we have a wall when you first go into the Board of Aldermen offices. That's a bunch of mailboxes. It's really just a bunch of cubby holes for each of the 28 alders. And last Friday, I received a letter, just a letter copy from the zoning department within the building division regarding this medical marijuana dispensary. And ultimately, it's just a copy of the letter that was sent to the applicant. And by that point, it had already been posted at the Steak and Shake as legally required that there'd be a conditional use hearing. So my information on this particular facility is fairly limited. I've not had any communication with the applicant, who is advised, sort of just in their standard template, they're advised to reach out to the alderman or to reach out to the neighbors or so on and so forth, as that can help inform the decision process. No one, to my knowledge, has made any attempts to reach out to me. I have not received any communication from the applicant. And ultimately, before I open it up to everyone's input here, I do want to say that I'm not taking a stance one way or the other. Now, do I have a personal stance? Absolutely. I'm a neighbor just like the rest of you in this neighborhood, in this city, in this ward. But I'm a legislator. And I do not feel that it is my role as a legislator to tell the executive branch how to function. So instead of offering my own support or opposition to it, I'm trying to get public input from Ward 12 neighbors, be it through meetings such as this, be it through informal surveys. There's a few other surveys I'm conducting in the ward, where I can sort of tag this onto it. Notably, a street down by Lowe's has requested conversion from a two-way to a one-way. And, you know, as I'm door knocking and getting their opinions on that, like, would you support a one-way? Yes, no, maybe. You know, yes, no, no answer. Would you support a speed hump? Yes, no, no answer. Oh, and since I've got you here on the porch, do you support the medical marijuana dispensary? I'm compiling that and presenting my findings to Mary Hart Burton, the zoning administrator, along with the voting record for when medical marijuana was on the state ballot, specifically how Ward 12 voted. So I am maintaining that I am not taking a stance. I will not be telling the executive branch one way or the other how to function in their positions, unless a situation occurs where I have to step in. A situation similar has recently occurred where I had to step in and say, okay, I'm ending this now. So with that said, I'm going to stop the sharing so that we can all come back. And by Lowe's. Donna, it is Steins from Grand, and then Grand turns into Steins, which then intersects with Eugene. So it is the, I would think the southernmost street. It's closest to 55. Yes, Steins, Steins, Steins. And I believe you live on that block, so I was gonna knock, but then it got to 9 p.m. and you know you start at 6:30 in the morning, going to 9 p.m. and you know you have a heart attack. So okay, sorry, there were some other comments that I wanted to get caught up on. So that said, I want to open it up to public comment in regards to the proposed medical marijuana dispensary. The public is always welcome to attend and encouraged to attend the occupational or the conditional use hearing. It will be next Thursday, a week from today, at 8:30 a.m. on the 17th. And they're virtual, so they won't be held on location or hall. You can call in, or there's also a Zoom meeting. And the way that they do it is they sort of host multiple conditional use hearings all at once, and then they just like sort of, you know, next. You know, I will be at it, but any citizens are absolutely welcome to attend it as well. So that said, I will finally open it up to public comment.
I'll go ahead and jump in and kick us off, if that's okay.
Of course.
Just want to say thank you for hosting this. First of all, Bill, appreciate you and all the information. Is there a way to find out if the owners of the proposed dispensary are local, or if it's somebody from outside of St. Louis or out of state? Because I would be more in favor of it if it were local ownership.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I know that the applicant switches Sorry, former Alderwoman Vicky Grass just texted me about the medical marijuana dispensary. So it is absolutely the topic of the week. The applicant is a TC Applico. The gentleman's name is Jeffrey Cromwell, which is all public information. Again, it's been publicly posted. And they do have an office on South Broadway, but I can check into that. I still have a week to do some research and to look into it. So I'm going to jot that down real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And then I wonder if, I have to wonder if state regulation for Missouri, which is very tight. I do know that medical marijuana dispensary regulations for at least Missouri are super, super tightly regulated. They wouldn't compel it having to be located within Missouri instead of out of state. I'm not sure. So let me jot that down. Locally owned. Okay. And then I did just receive a text from Alderwoman Vicky Grass, who notified me that there is a medical marijuana dispensary going in on the 6400 block of Michigan Ave near Holly Hills, which is the 11th ward. That's not 12th ward. I don't know if that's been approved by permitting or if they're also having an occupational use. It is interesting. I will say that we've suddenly had several kind of pop up in South City, not just Ward 12, but sort of South City as a whole. I think the closest to us was in the Grove, a company called Swade, SWADE. But otherwise, I think that other than that, you'd have to go down to Jefferson County to access one. So it seems that they're now suddenly, permits are now suddenly popping up here in South City too.
Bill, I know that the location on Michigan has been at that location since well before the pandemic. I know the landlord for that building that it's in, and they have been physically working last season. They're having a dumpster outside and new doors and windows installed. So they're pretty far, I think, down the processing to be well beyond what the Steak and Shake is. I would assume they have a conditional use permit that's been given to them long ago if they're going to spend that kind of money to rehab a building.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you know what it was before, Bill?
Well, it's had two different churches on the top floor and the basement. I frankly don't know what the first floor is where they're going to be. It's two rooms, one the dispensary and one paraphernalia kind of thing is what they were talking about pre-pandemic. So I don't know what it's evolved to, but no, I do not know what the ground floor was.
Okay. And I'll look into that as well because I'm interested if it's not the same company. But you are correct in that the Steak and Shake is currently built as a restaurant, right? Like we all know it was a sit-down restaurant. So the inside will absolutely have to have a substantial amount of money put in. They have to have a certain grade of a safe because they can only conduct in cash. Credit card companies, due to medical marijuana still being federally illegal, credit card companies will not transact. So they are cash only venues. And it's a very interesting, almost a case study of states' rights versus federal rights in that it's legal in the state of Missouri as per our constitution, as per amended by the 2018 vote, but it's still illegal at the federal level. So it's an example of the federal government not expressing supremacy over state law. So, which would be their constitutional right. Whenever there's a conflict between laws at the state and federal level, the federal law always takes supremacy if they so choose. And I don't know if that's going to change with the Biden administration, but so it would be cash only, but because of that, they have to have certain protective measures like a nearly bank grade safe, 24-hour security, so on and so forth. I believe only one person can be inside them at a time at the moment, one customer at a time, and whatnot. So that's a very good point in that it would be a substantial interior renovation for the Steak and Shake. Whereas if a restaurant went in, I believe Rally's was looking at it, which is really quite interesting in that Rally's is usually just a tiny little, little drive-through place. If a Rally goes in, but then Rally's moves out, it's still a restaurant space. So we could get something else, so on and so forth. It's just kind of, you plug in the pieces. But this would be a total and complete interior renovation. And the tax revenue, which isn't as high as Illinois, but it's still taxed pretty high, goes to veterans, and it goes to streets or roads at the state level. So the tax revenue, other than Missouri, St. Louis earnings tax, and so on and so forth, the main chunk of the taxes would go to state level veterans organizations and veterans funds and road funds through MoDOT. Are there any other comments? And you're never compelled to comment if you just want to listen in or so on and so forth. That's totally fine. Oh, Miss Annette, I can see you saying something, but you're. Oh, that's okay. Hold on 1 second. Did that
Okay.
work?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. I absolutely can.
Okay. This is my backyard, and I am not against medical marijuana. I feel I have family members that have it within their state, and it's helped with rheumatoid arthritis and people with cancer, pain management. So I'm not totally against it. My concern is that corner. If you look at Truella, you look at some of the realty places, that's already a high crime, considered a high crime area. CVS, and I don't know, they're not allowed to always report everything that happens, are constantly, in their 24-hour place, are constantly being robbed. As this place, I know there's high security, which I think is positive, but my concern is if recreational marijuana comes in, will that go there as well? And then that gets to be real interesting on who can be there to be at that place. Because that corner right now, we've got 3 pharmacies there already. And there's been problems with the bus depot, with homelessness and that. And I would be really more interested in having something like a restaurant. I heard Sonic instead of Rallies, but I think it'd be nicer to have something that would bring people in, like a food environment or something like that. And again, I'm not trying to be not my backyard kind of person, because I see the positives of it, but I just wish something better would go in there than that. That would be better for the neighborhood, is what I'm saying.
And I have to wonder if the applicant, this TC Applico, doesn't have and they'll have to have a security plan.
Oh yeah.
In place and so on and so forth. So again, the state, for them to be even licensed as a medical marijuana dispensary at the state level, they'll have to provide, blueprints and security protocols and there are contingencies on what if there's a break and what if there's this or the other. There's sort of emergency responses before the state will will approve them.
I mean, they've had such break-ins at that CVS, and I'm sure they don't have the security like this place would have, but I just watched that part of the neighborhood, and it doesn't give us a good reputation. And again, I'm torn because I see medical marijuana as being a good thing for people that need it. So,
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And again, I'm not personally taking a stance.
yeah,
No, if I start to be a bit too much of a devil's advocate or whatnot, tell me,
no, that's your job.
But I have spoken with a few other alders that have medical dispensaries in their wards and aren't also brand new. So like the one that I spoke of earlier in the Grove, Swade, SWADE. Well, I mean, Alderwoman Pill's been in for the same 2 months as me, so, but other alders have said that they mostly, or I won't say almost exclusively, because I hate to take hard stances, but that they ultimately do result in less crime of the surrounding area. I would want to see.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I'd like to see hard data on that too, or at least something
Yeah.
a little more than anecdotal evidence. But if that's the case, if it's going to result in less crime, then I mean, by all means. And I will say they have not asked for any tax abatements or TIFs or anything of the sort, which I'm not entertaining. I don't think those help our city. So, there's this Hilton tax abatement because the Hilton downtown is apparently a blighted zone. I don't support that. I'm definitely not going to support anything like that. That is the stance I will take on this dispensary. They're not getting any tax breaks out of me.
Okay.
But they also haven't requested them. So I'm kind of jumping the gun there. So, but that seems to be the most common concern is it going to increase crime in the area, or not necessarily crime, but does it, I spoke with some paramedics over on Hamburg, and they said, consider the clientele for medical marijuana, right? If it's someone who's having severe cancer treatments and this is the only way that stimulates their appetite or whatever, then they're already in a weakened, vulnerable state. And is it going to be safe for them going in and out of the facility? Or are we going to see an uptick in muggings? Are we going to see an uptick in that or the other? So all things that I have to consider and concerns that I'll further to Mary Hart Burton at zoning. And so I appreciate that. And that seems, again, most people seem to be, I'm not against medical marijuana, but I'm concerned about the location. So I hope to get a stance from, who's the state rep there? It's the smallest little sliver, Bridget Walshmore.
Yeah.
There's this teeny little sliver of her district that just happens to incorporate that area. So are there any other comments on this, or do we want to move on to another subject, or I can open it to general questions and comments as well? How are we feeling?
Trash.
Bill, are you able to share any of the details in relation to how we would attend the conditional use hearing, whether the link or whatever?
Yes, so the conditional use hearing, which is at 8:30 a.m. June 17th, so a week from today. But it doesn't mean that it'll be right at 8:30 a.m., which is what I'm concerned about, because again, it's come to my attention that they host multiple conditional use hearings all at once. So it's like conditional use hearing day instead of, this is the meeting, this is the meeting for the medical marijuana dispensary in Ward 12, and then tomorrow's going to be the meeting for this, and Friday will be the meeting, when Saturday will be the meeting for this. So because of the city observing Juneteenth as a recognized holiday, our board meeting will be that Thursday, which means at 10 a.m. I've got to, I have to head into the board meeting. But it'll be at 8:30 a.m. When you can log on. It'll be by either Zoom or dial in. You're welcome to do either both. The information is posted both in the letter that I received. So I'll make a post on my Facebook page, Bill Stevens, 12th Ward Alderman, with that information, as well as at the site. So if you were to go to the Steak and Shake, they have a publicly posted sort of Teflon poster that has all the information on it and whatnot. you can also reach out to the building division, specifically Mary Hart Burton as well. But I'll make that information available. And I might actually have it pulled up now. Give me just a second.
Sure.
Because I recall that Kathy Savage, our neighborhood improvement specialist, sent it over. Here it is. Let me get to it. Okay. But it's a PDF. Allison, do you prefer to be in the Zoom meeting, or do you prefer phone call?
Either or, honestly. No preference.
Okay. I'm just quickly jotting down the number, and I'll put it in the chat. Meeting ID. I found during the pandemic, with everything being virtual, whenever I have to look down to take notes, or if I'm on a phone call and I have to take notes, I have to do like a little do, like my little note-taking noise, so people know I'm disconnected. Katie, yes and no. It really does depend. Generally, they do try to keep them during weekdays because that's when City Hall is sort of active, you know, the usual 9 to 5. And I agree that it's a flawed system because let's see, 8:30 a.m. if I was still working for the library, you know, I mean, I'd be at work, you know, doing library things. So I agree, and that's why it's good. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. That's why it's good to, you know, send me a letter, send me an email, so on and so forth, because it's my job to be there, right? It's my job to further your concerns as my constituents, your opposition or your approval on your behalf. So let me type in the phone number for it. And if anyone wants to survey their block and get signatures, this did happen today where I got a letter from one citizen saying that all of the neighbors on his block were against it. And I can't accept that. I can't take one citizen's word on behalf of an entire block of constituents. And I mean, it doesn't matter if he's for, against, or whatever. I just, you know, so if you're doing something like that, please just get signatures or ask me to come survey your block or something. But I can't take letters that speak for people without their having signed it or without my knowing that that's accurate. And in this case, he was speaking on behalf of the entire neighborhood. So I can't accept that. And then Jamie, I do have a city/alder page, which I'll grab the link for in a second. I declined to have a little bio. They did request a little bio, like Bill likes cats. So it's kind of just plain. Nor are we even able to have many co-sponsoring legislation records. So I think I currently have one board bill that I've co-sponsored. And that's just because of the legislative session being so young. It's also noteworthy to say that we're about to go into summer recess, which will be 0275, which will be starting July 1st. So from July 1st until about September, the Board of Aldermen does not meet. We do not conduct official business. We're on summer recess. So I probably won't host town halls unless people want me to. And I can do drop-ins or we can do whatever. I just won't really have updates. I will be working on legislation. Allison, I just dropped the conditional use hearing phone number and meeting ID into the chat for you. And again, I will put this on my Facebook page as well. But during summer recess, I'll be focusing on some legislation that I'm currently drafting and whatnot. So we will have one in July because it discusses the month's preceding work, you know, so we're in the June session now, but I'm discussing what I did in May and sort of what's upcoming. So we'll have one in July, but then in August and September, we probably won't have one unless you all want. And we can organize, I can organize outside meetings like we did last night with the Princeton Heights Neighborhood Association. I'm working on some block meetings over in Boulevard Heights. It's what you guys want. Again, you're my boss. So, but if you see a pause in these town halls, I haven't given up on anyone. It's just that we're in recess. So any other medical marijuana comments? We still have 1 hour. Or Julie and Bill, if you wanna ask your question, that's fine too.
Yeah, this is Bill. You somewhat addressed this issue on your Facebook page, I know, but my question relates to speeding / red light running kind of issues in Boulevard Heights, and especially on Loughborough, but on the side streets as well, it's a problem. And I don't think this is what you meant, but I had a bit of a response to it sounding like you were kind of saying this is just culture of the neighborhood and you've got to kind of live with that. It's where you live and that's going to happen. Well, I disagree with that. You know, if that is what you meant, which I hope it wasn't, you know, people driving 60, 70 miles an hour down Loughborough, I don't think is anybody's idea of what the neighborhood ought to be, or running stop signs just everywhere is what the culture of the neighborhood. I mean, it's a very walkable neighborhood with a lot of people out, children playing, people walking dogs, people using the park, which I know is in the next district. But so I just wanted to hear your thoughts on, you know, those issues.
Is that in response to the Boulevard Heights neighborhood page where someone asked about speed?
Yeah, I think so. It's Julie that's actually on there, and she, you know, was telling me about it and showed me, you know, your response, which again, like I said, initially what she told me your response was, and then we went back and read it and I said, well, I'm more comfortable with that response than what I thought you were saying that he said, but it still is. I'd like to know, you know, if you have any thoughts on how to address it. I know people have suggested, you know, speed bumps and, you know, I don't know the answer clearly. We have lots of stop signs, but if people ignore the stop signs, it doesn't really do much good.
Mm-hmm. Well, so when I say it's a cultural problem, I'm not speaking about the neighborhood because I don't believe it's a neighborhood problem. I don't think it's an issue with Boulevard Heights residents or Princeton Heights neighborhood residents. I think that, you know, we have these substantial traffic problems on Hampton, Kings Highway, and Loughborough, and Gravois too, and Germania, and Carondelet, because these are all the main arterial roadways. I can't say that today. So, you know, pre-pandemic, Hampton alone saw 17,000 cars a day. I mean, that's not only Princeton Heights or Boulevard Heights drivers. So when I say it's a cultural problem, what I mean by that is not my residents necessarily, though I'm sure a few of my residents are speeding too, don't get me wrong, but more so it's, you know, it's the advent of car technology. So for example, an all-electric vehicle is actually really quite zippy. I mean, you can go 0 to 60 in a Chevy Volt in seconds, and you could breathe on the pedal and hit 60 miles per hour. It's insane. And also, I believe that we've become globally more of an instantaneous global culture, in that, you know, we have the full breadth of the internet in our pockets. So when I say it's a cultural problem, I mean that it's that people aren't slowing down, that people are faster and everything's faster paced in society and everything's immediate gratification and so on and so forth. So that's what I mean by that I absolutely did not intend to insult the neighbors or to put it on the neighbors and say, well, this is just the world we live in now. And that's why I'm spending rather large sums of my ward capital to address these traffic issues, such as on Hampton with the Hampton traffic study and Kings Highway. Interestingly enough, stop signs present problems in and of themselves, and that there's a sense of lost time. So when someone comes to a full stop at a stop sign, or even rolls through a stop sign, there's this perception that they have to make up time or make up speed. So they end up speeding immediately thereafter. And as we all know, there's absolutely an issue with people just ignoring them completely or being distracted and just blowing right through them. And I think to some degree, back to this cultural aspect, I think that people just kind of gave up caring in some degree, and they just no longer care about other drivers, and they just blow through stoplights or stop signs because, I mean, they're not getting caught. There's no reprimands with it. So ultimately, that is what I intended to communicate by saying it's a cultural issue. Kings Highway's current infrastructure, with the exception of Nottingham and Kings Highway, where that super weird intersection is, I mean, that's just plain bad infrastructure. That's just confusing. But the rest of it that we have to address and that we're putting all this money towards is perfectly fine if people would go 35 miles per hour, if people would pay attention to the curve as you approach Loughborough, as you approach Loughborough. No, Gravely. And if people would just slow down, pay attention, and care. And just 2 days ago this week, another driver wasn't paying attention. They missed that curve at Bonita, plowed right into a cement planter and knocked it onto the sidewalk, totaled their vehicle. You know, vehicles these days, modern technology destroys the vehicle so it doesn't destroy you. And who wins? I mean, who, you know, everyone loses in that situation. And it's a bit of a Sisyphean task because you're trying to outpace these cultural issues of not paying attention, of being on your phone or being distracted or being behind the wheel of a vehicle that just has too much power behind it. So in regards to traffic mediation, what we can do, I do think Loughborough, between sort of that Carondelet Park stretch of Loughborough, so perhaps beginning so far back as Morganford, you know, another main sort of arterial roadway, to Loughborough Commons, I think that does warrant a traffic study, or at the very least, a speed study. And the difference between the two is tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, a traffic study of just that strip could be $75,000 right there. And that doesn't implement anything. That gets me a report. That would have to be done in tandem with wards 13 and 11, because that's right, the 12th ward border. And I applaud you for recognizing that Carondelet Park is not in Ward 12. I've gotten innumerable emails about, well, you know, Carondelet Park's in our ward and you're not taking care of it. It's like, it's not in our ward. I'm restricted in what I can do in Carondelet Park because of it. The speed hump process, which is what that post that I made the comment on that we're discussing right now.
Excuse me, can you give us Alderwoman Schweitzer's phone number, email? We'll call her about Carondelet Park.
So it would be.
That's a joke.
Oh, okay. I was going to say it would be Alderwoman Schweitzer and Alderwoman Martin. And don't get me wrong, we do try to collaborate and be in constant communication. And we all have standing sort of agreements where, like, if I'm in Ward 11, and this did happen, you know, I'm over in Ward 11 and someone comes up to me and says, oh, hey, you're an alderman. Can you have this dumpster that's been blocking my garage for over a year moved? well, I'm not going to tell them no, right? And Sarah Wood Martin's like, just take care of it, you know? And likewise, if she or Ann were in my ward here in Ward 12 and someone was like, can you help me with this? Like, it's just a quick call to the right commissioner. Oh my gosh, like, please, you know, we're South City. You know, we're not Ward 12, Ward 13, so on and so forth. We're not little fiefdoms. So if you do have an issue with Crandallette Park, you can reach out to me about it and I'll get the right people involved. I just can't compel parks to do something is what I mean. You know, I can't tell the commissioner like, hey, Crandallette needs to be mowed because she's going to say, it's not your bailiwick, Alderman. I'll say, okay. But speed humps, I do want to speak very briefly about speed humps. In that is a process. It is a process. So in order to get a speed hump, I have to commission or authorize a speed study. And we've all participated in speed studies. It's just those wired tubes that you drive over. And it's like just a thick black tube that they lay across the road. And that's measuring traffic, it's measuring speed, volume, so on and so forth. That's a requirement by streets. And what they'll do is they'll conduct a little speed study. We get 5 free a year, and then I have to pay $900 for each subsequent. I'm commissioning 2 because residents have been hit or nearly hit. One being a deaf resident on Robert by Hampton, and one being a child on Lizette. So, you know, I'm kind of exerting my aldermanic authority and doing 2 there. The Lizette one is also a follow-up to see how traffic was diverted from Holly Hills getting speed humps. But they do a speed study. They then look at the 85th percentile of speed. So, you know, what does the 85th percentile of speed look like? And usually it's much closer to the speed limit than we think. There are notable exceptions. Hampton, you know, we think that the drivers that stick out to us are the ones that blow through stop signs or blow through stoplights or just go flying down the road. But the 85th percentile of speed on Hampton, which is a 35-mile-per-hour road, and thus can have golf carts on it as a small aside. I'm working on legislation to address that too. The 85th percentile was 37.5 miles per hour. So, you know, streets takes this data and then they make a recommendation, and I put recommendation in air quotes because ultimately make a decision of whether or not they will approve speed humps to be installed. And I cannot change that decision. If Commissioner Flake says we are not installing speed humps here, not speed bumps, they will do speed bumps for alleyways. They don't require a study. If you're having alleyway issues with speed, just tell me and we'll put speed bumps in. But if he says no to speed humps, that's it. I have no authority to make him change his mind. If he says yes, this does warrant speed humps, they will then cost me $3,000 to $8,000 depending on various factors for each one. So, you know, a wide enough block such as Loughborough, which they won't do speed humps on because it's an emergency thoroughway. I mean, it would easily be $36,000, you know, just to get a couple sets of them, if not more, depending, because that's the issue with Loughborough is that it's straight, you know, it's just a straight shot. And this is Loughborough between at the beginning of Crandallette Park to the end of Crandallette Park specifically, which I believe is the problem area that everyone was discussing. It's a straight shot. It's a fairly even grade. It's neither very uphill or downhill, so it's a pretty flat grade. And it accesses a major highway. So, you know, you're late to work, you need to get to the highway now. Well, Loughborough is the perfect opportunity to break some speed laws and break some traffic laws. So we're looking to increase enforcement. And I'm glad to say that enforcement has seen an uptick in traffic related issues starting in downtown. So we're trying to bring enforcement back so that people realize that there are repercussions because it's a safety concern. I've seen videos from the Ring doorbells of cars like barrel rolling across yards. That's not That's not why any of us moved down to South City. And that's not how any of us drive. And if any of you do drive that, let me know, because we're gonna have a chat after this meeting about your driving. But and you know, so I do take it very seriously. We are taking measures that aren't always readily communicated on our part. So that's on me, and I apologize for that. I got a very vicious email today about how I'm not doing anything on Kings Highway, and I'm like, we're doing everything with Kings Highway, but am I adequately communicating that? So I appreciate you bringing that up and addressing it, because traffic is everyone's concern, and boy, are we trying to are we trying to make it better. So okay.
Germania is another road you need to pay attention to too, especially since it's been redone. It's become a raceway.
Oh, I know. And we had a new light installed. So you'll notice that most of the street lights that, you know, the ones that are on a timer and come on at night, you'll notice that they're almost all of them now LED lights. And that is an efficiency thing. That is a, excuse me, a light pollution thing, so on and so forth. We still have 435 to do. So let me know if your block hasn't been updated. They're just 200 bucks a pop. That's a low cost. But we just put in a brand new one, and like the next day it was hit and knocked over by, I think, a drunk driver actually heading towards 55. You know, it really seems that they're gunning towards the highway. So Alderman Oldenburg and myself are commissioning a study of the full stretch of Carondelet and River to Pear Boulevard. So his ward will be River to Pear from Lansdowne to about Morgan Ford. And then I'm picking up Morgan Ford to 55. And we'll be doing a speed study. No, I'm sorry, not a speed study, a traffic study, like a full-scale traffic study there. I'm hoping that I can also have one conducted for Germania from Gravois, where it turns into Germania, to 55. Because again, I can only do within my borders. And then ultimately, all of this might not matter, or might be sort of stymied by the mayor wants to do an overall traffic study of the entire city. And that wouldn't look at residential streets, but it would look at main thoroughways, especially arterial thoroughways like River to Pear and Carondelet, Germania, perhaps even Loughborough, that might be a bit nestled within the residential area, and our highways. So if she's going to conduct a citywide traffic study, then one, we might be able to save a substantial amount of money in our ward capital, but it might kind of stymie our plans to do these ourselves. And then Donna's asked, not your ward, but do you know anything about the Lowe's construction? Specifically, is that entrance road going to be two-way again when they're done? I just noticed that this past week while I was doing my survey of Steins, Miss Donna, and I'm not sure because it's Ward 11. So I don't get the permit activity, so I'm not sure what they're doing. I'd plan to reach out to Sarah Wood Martin tomorrow after our meeting, after our board meeting, to inquire what's going on. And I will say that a situation like that's the perfect example of what's really kind of frustrating about city communication, in that it's right on our border. I mean, that is the 12th ward, 11th ward border. But they don't consider that, oh, my residents are also directly affected by this too, if not even more so, because the only residential strip right there is my ward. So I have to come across these things as neighbors email me or as I see them. And I do try to do drive-throughs or walkthroughs of my ward frequently. So I'm looking into it because it's going to affect traffic. So if I do a speed study or anything of the sort, it's going to be sort of biased data or incorrect data or just affected data. So, you know, if I'm going to pay for a speed study and the data is going to be, be affected by this temporary construction setup, well, you know, then I've just wasted your taxpayer dollars. If it's going to remain a one-way, well, then is that going to alleviate traffic on Stein so that we don't have to do a two-way to one-way conversion? So I have to consider these things. But having seen Stein's, which I believe is your block, Miss Donna, I something has to be done about it. And excuse me, it's just the configuration of the street and its location. So the answer, I guess, is no. I don't know anything, but I'm looking into it with Sarah Wood Martin. And I'm an alderman, so I can compel Lowe's to tell me what they're doing as well. So. Okay, let me see. Do we have any other comments? And have there been any conversations about adding bike lanes to any of these road refurbishments? How about making the painted lines on the roads reflective so they can be better seen? Okay, we will not do reflective lines because they contain little glass beads, and the little glass beads result in traction issues during wet conditions. And I don't like that. I don't like that that's the answer. The paint that they use, I mean, and it's not just paint, right? They're not just going to streets, isn't just going to Lowe's. It is very specific paint, it's specific brightness, it's a specific regulated, you know, reflectivity and so on and so forth. But the street paint itself is slippery when wet, you know, like if it's raining, there's already a traction issue. But then there's the added visual issue where you can't see, if it's nighttime and raining, you can't see the road lines, you know? So I would like for us to convert to reflective paint. You'll see in certain areas of the city, they use those little reflective ceramic like risers, but if you run over it, that's it. It's broken. You know, I mean, they're not durable. So that's something that I'm kind of chagrined about in City Hall. Whenever they do a road diet, which is a lane reduction, they always include bike lanes because it's essentially free. You know, you're paying for the paint and it's the repaving that's expensive. Asphalt is very expensive. So the painting is just kind of, you know, well, they're going to do it anyway, so why not include them? I am opting to include a protected bike lane on Kings Highway from Bonita, where the Shamel pots are, the concrete planters. Along that curve, we're putting in a protected bike lane. And what that means is it would be like a curb island of sorts, where it's a concrete low 6-inch barrier. So it's a standard curb height, and it's just like an island strip. You know, if someone took like a giant icing, like a piping bag, and just drew along the curve out of concrete, that's what it would be. I haven't come up with a good metaphor for that yet. Yesterday it was, if you could take that strip of road and pull it up by 6 inches, that's also a bad metaphor. So I welcome metaphor suggestions. But the hope there is, you know, it's less for the bike lane and more so for when cars go careening into the Shamel pots, the concrete planters. City Hall doesn't like when we call them Shamel pots. Because if a vehicle hits it going fast enough to actually go over it, both tires would be hitting the concrete barrier, this concrete island. And then by the time that they reach the concrete planters, their momentum has been killed enough that, you know, it's not pushing the Shamel pot around or whatnot. Now that's considering if it's a sedan. If it's a high-rise truck, that's a separate issue. Also, it's not traction assistance, but if a vehicle is coming along into that curve, and then say their back tires skid and they sort of spin out, or they how do we say, like hydroplane, the curb would be there to act as a sort of bumper, that protected bike lane curb, to sort of kind of bump them along the curve. All things considered, again, if you're going 70 miles per hour on Kings Highway, I mean, short of putting up a wall, you know, so that the speed of traffic is also something that we have to consider. But if the vehicle were to spin out and hit the curb, the curb would sort of guide it along the same path and help to stabilize the vehicle instead of them just spinning around in circles until they hit the shamel pots or they hit a property or so on and so forth. So yes, the answer is yes, we are putting in bike lanes. A surprising number of individuals do bike on Kings Highway every day, and doing so would actually connect the Greenway. So it would connect two different points of the Greenway together via Kings Highway. And it's just why wouldn't we? Because we already have the paint, we have the opportunity because we've repaved and so on and so forth. So whenever we do repaving and repainting, we are inputting new bike lanes. And the city just debuted a new protective bike lane measure, which would not be effective on Kings Highway, but maybe Hampton, and they're called zebra bumps. And they're really quite interesting. They look like if you took an almond and you cut it in half lengthways and then just set it on its side. And they're rubber and they're black and white, and they're called zebra bumps. But they help to protect the bike lane as well and are significantly cheaper. But I would like for us to one day have reflective paint. I mean, that's a big one. That's a big one for me. So. Do we have anything else or any questions, comments, concerns, any complaints? Anything like that?
I have something else. I know that the chief of police believes in cameras and he believes in all the math things, but alleys, and I know there's been pictures of alleys on Facebook and next door, and we're constantly in our neighborhood battling the people from Afton or whoever filling up our trash containers. This last week, a contract person filled up 2 big trash containers, and all but one house now on both sides of the alleys that is full. The neighborhood is now full except for one house, which needs to be torn down. But anyway, we've asked for cameras, even if it's temporary, because now we have no other choice of where to put our trash, where to put our recycling, where to put our yard waste. But even neighbors across the street are using yard waste. And I don't know if there's a way to inform people of what needs to happen, or even temporarily put in a camera. Because I have yard waste behind my house. It's forever full the day after it's emptied. And I'm always cleaning up the alley because they're sloppy. And so it's not a major big deal, but it gets tiring after a while to clean up after other people. And our alley by no means is one of the worst, but it is frustrating when we have no other choice of what to do with our trash. And when you have to go out and you can't find a place to put your trash until they pick it up on Monday, it gets a little frustrating.
Well, absolutely. And it is a concern if county residents are dumping trash in city dumpsters because it's theft. I mean, it's not theft in the sense of
right,
taking something, but they're not paying for that. So
right, we
do have a division within the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Force, within the department, specifically that addresses.
I've talked to them.
Okay. So for everyone else, we have a specific division just for trash related issues and environmental related issues, especially, so an easy day for them would be there's someone from Afton using city dumpsters to dump trash and they're taking up the trash and whatnot. A hard day would be, okay, there's someone dumping motor oil into River to Pear.
Right.
So that's kind of their scope, not to say that they would have a hard time of addressing the River to Pear issue, but that's sort of the scope of what they do. Well, to put in a permanent camera, which might be an option, I think it's about $30,000 or $40,000. They are expensive, but we have temporary tree cameras, or not tree cameras. I think they call it Skylab.
The hunting ones or something like that.
Well, no,
Because
no, no.
when
Um,
people are dumping, they're dumping at night. You can hear them with their trucks. And then the next morning you're seeing big bags of plastic, whatever, in those dumpsters.
mhm,
You know, and it's consistent. It's consistent.
mhm. Well, what I mean is, and you may have seen them around town, Carol Howard tends to hog them actually, because District 1 only has 2 available, and they're always in her ward. And it's like, well, Carol. But they're these mobile units where they pull them like a trailer sort of behind a vehicle, and then they pop up a series of cameras, and it's like a clover leaf of cameras where there's one and there's 4, and they're powered by a generator, so they're just temporary measures. The generator is built into the the base of it and all that, and they're better than putting like a cop car, like an abandoned cop car on a block, because that's not effective. I mean, it takes just 2 days for people to realize that it's just an abandoned cop car. Leaves or debris or whatnot will accumulate on it, and clearly it hasn't moved. So they'll put in these Skylab cameras instead. I am co-sponsoring legislation to better regulate how that footage can be used and how that information can be used, because currently no regulation exists. And that protects citizens and that protects officers. It's Board Bill 31 specifically. But when you don't have any regulation, that doesn't mean there's no laws. So that's a small aside. Donna, yes. So it's a live feed, and we have a there's the surveillance center, I believe, in the headquarters downtown, where they have 24-hour surveillance of those cameras, and not just at the Skylab, the mobile units, but also at intersections. You'll see where they have like flashing red and blue cameras. They monitor those and so on and so forth. I don't know. I'm sure if they caught an accident happening in an intersection, they would respond to it, but I don't know the full extent of their engagement with it. But I do know that they're monitored 24 hours. So if you drive around downtown, like the library will frequently, Central Library will frequently have them installed temporarily by the park on Locust. Just because, whenever something violent occurs, and I don't know if that's the library or if that's just police department making that call, or if it's the alderman, but they were very frequently there while I worked there. And it's it'll be because someone was stabbed or there was a violent fight or something of the sort. They've got one in the Grove currently because there's been a lot of car break-ins during the weekends at Sarah and Shoto. So where the Cortex is and whatnot, and there's that empty lot that used to be a gas station. They've got one there because of car break-ins and whatnot. So if they don't catch it, Donna, live, they can roll back the footage and see, if someone were to call and say, oh, hey, this person dumped trash illegally in our alley last night, then they can say, okay, they'll roll back the footage and grab it there. And if they can get like a license plate or something, then they can track it down that way. But the city takes refuse abuse very seriously. And a lot of times it's that citizens and neighbors just don't realize, like with bulk pickup is a good example, because neighbors constantly will put their bulk items next to the dumpster.
Yes.
And it's because, I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's just because people don't realize, and they're actually making a lot of work for themselves by carrying it that way. But you're just supposed to put it behind your parcel, behind your property. And in fact, if you so choose, you have one free visit to the city dump once a month. Anyone, any citizen paying water, sewer, trash, specifically trash, has the right to go to the city dump and dump their bulk items once a month for free. You just have to have your bill and your license, you know, a photo ID with your address, your trash bill, that is. So that said, it's not always neighbors, and we do periodically hear of, we find out like, okay, county members or contractors, your part of the ward has a lot of contractor issues, and I think it's because of Lowe's. Not because of Lowe's, but I think it's because of the presence of a Lowe's. And that's the issue with Steins, is that we're having contractors circumventing traffic, like cutting through residential streets, and then illegally dumping or just improperly disposing of hazardous materials like paints, oils, so on and so forth, solvents. So something like that, you know, send me an email or get in contact with the District 1 Refuse Division specifically. Julie and Bill say, we found that they don't want to be caught. If we walk out there and we see them drive up, they take off. Snap a photo if it's safe to do so. If you have any concern about your safety, or that if you snap a photo of someone, they're going to get violent and confront you, then don't. I would rather a dumpster be filled and I have to have refuse come out early or have more work on my part than someone getting injured. But snap a photo or jot down a license plate number or something like that. You know, but please never confront them directly. I've had neighbors do that in my short, less than 2 months in office. And then you're like, oh my God, you're going to get shot, you know, like, you know, so that is why I'm the elected. So put that on me. Excellent. And Annette, you're on Alamania. No, you're not. You're not on Alamania.
Austria.
That's what it was. It was Austria. Thank you. I kept thinking that sounded weird. Now, the end of Austria there at Gravois has weird concrete pouring, doesn't it? Where it's like,
it ends in CVS. When CVS moved in, they took 7 houses. So they moved the alley down. And so you come in, the only way you can get in there now is coming down Austria and turning around and coming down the alley.
yes, but when you're on Austria itself, so you're
Right,
you know, and you're the front lawn side of it. At
right.
the end of Austria and Gravois, the concrete was mispoured, wasn't it? Is that Austria, and the concrete's like all messed up?
Well, they closed, I think they closed it down when CVS came in, because it's a 2-way there by the bank and CVS.
Yes.
But from the alley to Stoli, it's a 1-way towards Gravois. So that is strange in there, but it was, part of it was due to CVS moving in, because that was an abandoned BP and car wash. And so it needed to come down, and CVS took that plus 7 houses. So that's why it's so strange down that end now.
And the BP, I actually saw a sign for, I think maybe on the highway. So we need to contact the state and say, you know, that BP's hasn't been there in forever.
Yeah.
I'll have to remember where I saw that. But there's a block somewhere near you on Gravois where it meets. And when they poured the concrete, it's uneven. It's not flat. So it kind of like, you know.
Well, and some of the intersections, the curves come out, so you might hit them. It's not great, but it's down by the church, which I think is in the county, down by, what was it? Used to be St. George's. That gets strange in there too. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But okay. Well, there's only 6 of us, 7 of us, including myself, left. So I'm hopefully
we're done.
Everyone else. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring to my attention, or would you like me to drop my email in the chat again? Because email's best. I am finding people are tagging my personal Facebook profile on the neighborhood groups and whatnot, which is fine. But they will then send me private messages, and that's not fine.
Do the
Unless it's
email.
to yeah, if it's to my Facebook page, that's different. But if it's to my personal profile, we're now getting into some sticky public reporting areas where I could be compelled by the Attorney General of Missouri to overturn every single conversation I've ever had on Facebook Messenger through my personal profile. I know, Katie, isn't that a fun isn't that a fun thought? And Katie, you and I need to have a conversation because we had a previous conversation this week, but your interest in that role. So we need to start chatting about that because I'm interested in supporting that for
Great,
sure.
yeah, I wanted to just kind of pick your brain on, you know, where things are with that seat currently and like what running would be like and when that even would happen. So yeah, let's have coffee sometime. Happy to buy you coffee or lunch or whatever. And yeah, we'll talk about it.
Absolutely. And then as a note, I get a $350, every alderman gets a $350 expense account just for things like that. So you never have to buy me coffee. I will always be happy to buy you all coffee. And this month I thought I was making a donation from that fund to Tower Grove Pride for their caravan. I think that they no longer needed my donation, but I'd pledged one. And I'm also pledging a $150 donation as the co-chair of Arts, Conventions, Tourism, and Humanities to the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. So just so you know how I'm using this expense account. So far we're making donations. So Julie and Bill, rather, you're absolutely welcome. We had 3 bills in the chat tonight, or in the video tonight. I'm quite pleased with that. I'm happy about that. Otherwise, always feel free to reach out, call, text, email, either's fine. If you absolutely have to tag me on Facebook or send me a private message on Facebook, that's fine too. I just have to make a little paper report, you know, have to keep a separate record. And tagging me on like a post is absolutely fine as well. You know, it's really the private messages. But otherwise, I think I'm really just taking up everyone's time at this point. So thank you all for being here as always. And I will see everyone in July. Excellent. Bye, everyone.